Good morning and welcome to Panorama's review of the 2022 ERP report. This is an annual exercise we do every year to get a user's perspective on the state of the market, the software, and their experiences. My name is Alan Sultan. I am the Director of Innovation, Panorama Consulting Group. I have been here for a couple of years in this role, and I've spent the last 36 years before that working for a number of different ERP vendors, primarily in project management and implementation and some project design. So I want to, before we start, just say thank you for taking the time. I know everybody is busy, but we are going to give away a free 1-hour consulting session to the first 3 respondents after today's webinar, and we'll talk about how you can get that free hour at the end of the webinar. So a little bit about us. So Panorama is an independent and agnostic enterprise software consulting firm. We have a number of different practices from software selection and implementation, which would typically include business process management, organizational change management, technology assessment. But we have a number of other practices, including digital strategy or digitalization, project recovery, financial and operational restructuring, and we serve a number of different markets, from manufacturing to professional services to government. In the last 15 years, we've done several hundred of these software consulting engagements. We have a broad range of customers, both in terms of size, geography, and also in terms of their industry or their sector. So it gives us a good, well-rounded perspective where we can look at different companies and bring best practices across typical industry silos. We've also had the opportunity over these last number of years to work with a great number of software packages, primarily around ERP, but also warehouse management, human capital management, CRM, and we try to take of our experiences and organize it and structure it through our industry relations team that maintains a knowledge base of all the different vendors, their technologies, their functional fit, their industry fit, and that becomes a resource to us and our clients as we work with them to help them optimize their IT strategy and put it in alignment with their business strategy. So what we're going to talk about today is go a little bit into our independent research and client experiences in the 2022 ERP report that has been recently published. So it gives an overview of organizational selection and implementation practices when it comes to enterprise software. The data that you're going to see is self-reported by people who went to our website. And what we're hoping to do is give some insight into what best practices are and lessons learned from both selection and implementation of these systems. A little note about the data that you're going to be looking at. So responses were collected between December 2020 and October 2021. It was done through a survey on our website. And again, as I mentioned before, it is self-reporting. We try to take the data and rationalize it to make sure it makes sense, make sure we can also look at if there are any that are outliers and exclude those from the analytics. We had over 140 business professionals involved in either an implementation or have completed the first phase of an implementation of one of these software packages. As you'll see, it includes organizations of all sizes across multiple industries and multiple locations. I will say that this year, more than 60% of the respondents were multi-site organizations. Many of them had international presence. So this is a quick look at what the industry segments, how they were divided up based on respondents. We have seen pretty much a consistent response from manufacturing as almost always being the lead respondents we've had over the last number of years. Information technology, healthcare, construction, and retail are pretty typically what we see on a consistent basis. And what we're seeing nowadays is that with the advent of more data, better analytics, that again, there's a lot more customers coming to ERP looking for digitalization insight in these segments. So there were also a variety of different systems that were reported. So when we looked at the data, there were over 30 software solutions that had either been implemented or selected. The top 6 included Oracle, Microsoft in different flavors, SAP Infor, IFS, and Financial Force. Nearly 2/3 of the organizations selected a cloud deployment for the system. And that was especially consistent in North America and Europe. They led the cloud deployments with almost 3/4 of their systems implemented being in the cloud. For those that selected on-premise, there were a couple of primary factors that influenced that decision. They are security, risk of data loss, and I think we're seeing that again. This has been a couple of years. We've been seeing some issues with people with ransomware and breaches in terms of data that have created a little bit of fear in terms of putting your stuff out in the cloud. And another thing that also was reported is connectivity issues. So, and we see this more in some of the international organizations than we do with organizations that are single country. So part of what we're also going to discuss and what was reported is kind of a move towards digital strategy. So what is the digital strategy, or how is it defined? Well, we look at it as thinking through the possibilities of using connectivity and data. One of the primary movers we're seeing is that people have lots and lots of data. They're trying to figure out how to turn that into a competitive advantage, how to help take that data, transform the customer experience, reshape services, and a part of the way they do that is technology, but also a big part of it is the change in value creation, structural changes, financial reporting and analytics, and also how do you optimize your business processes to take advantage of the digital technologies that are out there. What we're seeing is there's this evolution of systems starting from transactional. So if you go back 20, 30 years, these systems, these enterprise systems were primarily transactional. They were driven by orders. Orders ran through MRP. MRP drove procurement suggestions and production suggestions that produced work orders and completions and invoices and all that stuff. But what we're seeing, and what we have seen, is there's been an evolution here from being strictly internal transaction-based to moving to e-commerce. So you expanded the enterprise to include customers, vendors, stakeholders within the enterprise system. More and more self-service. So now we're taking advantage of the capabilities of the system so they can start doing some processing on their own. And now we're kind of moving into this idea of automation, things like robotic process automation, workflow management, through digitalization, the application of AI. So as a reflection of that, what we're seeing is originally these enterprise systems were system of record, i.e. Transactions, to systems of engagement when we start talking about e-commerce and self-service, where now they're actually more system of insight, where we're looking at the data and trying to structure the data, interpret the data, and make predictions based on what that data is. So these systems have become more and more intelligent. When we look at the respondents and what they reported, we see there was still primarily 42% of the respondents said this was an ERP implementation that they'd done. It's more of a point solution to handle pain points and some opportunities. Then the second greatest number was what we would call digital business transformation. This is an examination of business processes, user experiences, customer experiences, use of data to really do a transformation into almost a new business model. And then we have that kind of part in the middle, which is a technology-enabled business improvement, where they're letting the process improvement and the customer experience improvement drive what the technologies are. We've seen this kind of spectrum across different companies, kind of going anything from on one side of the spectrum that's implement a point solution to the other point where we're saying we need to really do it some kind of digital transformation, business model transformation based on changes in the economy, whether those are work at home or supply chain disruptions or the results of the pandemic. What do those kind of digital initiatives look like? Well, obviously mobility is one that has been deployed already over the last few years and continues to be important. Web commerce, which is, again, has been deployed a lot. But now we're getting more and more into the what we would call the intelligent applications, predictive and analytics, business intelligence, and artificial intelligence. So again, the idea that we take data, we try to structure it, we try to have the systems help us interpret it, we try to have it help us predict and actually affect what's going to happen in the future. One of the things we thought that was really interesting is to look at what the expectations were for these companies implementing these enterprise systems and try to understand the difference between what they expected and what they got. And one of the things we found is that going into an application of new software or new to enterprise technology, one of the most important things is to sit down and try to document and quantify what you expected the benefits to be. So when we look at what was reported, the organizations that quantify, these are what they expected to get. The vast majority expected an increase in productivity and efficiency, IT maintenance costs, customer experience, and you go on down the line. So this is kind of what they expected. This is kind of what they had documented, how they quantified it. What was interesting is that they got unexpected benefits, but they wouldn't have been able to actually quantify this if they hadn't set some benchmarks and set some expectations. So inventory levels, compliance, interaction with customers, all of these things actually produced more benefits than what was expected and what had been put into the ROI model. Part of this has to do with process improvement. So, the old adage is that if you take a bad process and you automate it, what you'll get is bad data and bad results faster. So what we also see is that there's been quite a focus on business improvement, whether it is most of the business processes or just the key business processes. More than 95% of customers focus on that first. And that had a lot to do with being able to realize benefits. Another thing that we saw is that the cost of a project can be difficult to estimate, especially if you haven't set any benchmarks, especially if you don't have an ability to monitor and manage the implementation through milestones and toll gates. This is something we work with our clients to do, is to say having a project plan is great, having a timeline is great, but you really need to put in milestones where you can measure benefits and realization of those benefits as you go, so you can do a mid-course correction. So you see there's quite a bit where the project was completed about half of the time, or a little less, on budget, but the other half, a good 50% of them, they missed the cost of the project, which is tied exactly to what the timeline is. So half of them were done on time, and half of them, they misjudged what they thought it was going to be. One of the things that you'll notice is that when we look at the level of customization, there's almost an exact correlation between how much customization was done, almost 50% for moderate customization, and even more when you add heavily customized, to misjudging the cost and the time of the project. So one of the lessons you can take away from here is that if you're going to customize, you should set a realistic expectation of time and cost for the project. So what we found is, you go through this, that nearly 1 in 3 of the implementations found the business process aspect of the implementation to be difficult or very difficult. And similarly, 1 in 3 implementations found the organizational change aspect to be difficult or very difficult. By contrast, half the implementations found the technical easy or very easy. So while the technology is getting better, the tools are getting better, where there's still going to be issues that will affect your timeline and your budget and your benefits realization is going to be in the process design and the organizational adoption of the new technology and processes. So the more you can get in front of process, organizational change, data and analytics before you apply technology, the more successful you're going to be. Part of this also has to do with getting some outside help. What you want to do is not, as they say, pave the cow path, to recreate what you are already done, to be limited by your own perspectives, your constraints, either because we've done this the same, that's forever, and there's no reason to change. So having an outside perspective can help. And these are the kinds of consulting engagements that these customers worked with to be able to get benefits. And you'll see that the largest is in this business process management re-engineering, technology assessment, software implementation, change management, going down from the bottom. These are the things where our clients, our respondents, I should say, really understood that they could benefit from outside help. So the takeaways, first is the evolution of technology enabled by the cloud continues to march towards digitalization. I think that's an important thing to understand, is because as the world continues to change, as the technology gets better, as the ability to leverage data into actionable analytics gets better, we're going to see more and more of this move towards digitalization, and become more important to be able to select the right package. Another thing that we've seen when you look at timeline, benefits, and costs is the more time you spend in strategic planning, the less time is wasted on the tactical tasks that happen during the implementation. The message between the outside consultants is an outside-in approach increases the likelihood of success. You want to get out of your silos. You want to have a customer-facing view. You want to be able to look at best practices. And a lot of that you won't find inside your organization, but from outside your organization. So, having help, having somebody from the outside come in and give you a fresh set of eyes can be very, very helpful. And especially when we talk about process design and organizational change. And finally, the proper package selection reduces the need for customization and leads to more successful projects. And these are all tied together. So, looking at an outside-in approach helps you to the proper package selection, the proper process design, organizational change, and again, allows you to focus more on strategy than on tactics. So that's kind of what we want to go for today, to kind of give you the benchmark survey results, to give you some insight in terms of what the organizations have found and what they are continuing to look for as they move forward. And as I mentioned before, we do have a special offer for the first 3 customers who go through and contact us through the webpage. So contact us on our website, panorama-consulting.com. Enter the code FREEHOUR along with your comments and how can we help section of the forum, and we will reach out and set up a free hour of consulting for you. I'm going to look at the chat here and see what kind of questions we have. So hang on just a second. Let's see what we have. Okay. The first question is, what's the difference between business intelligence and predictive analytics? Okay, that's a good question. I think the way you kind of look at it is, or should look at it is, business intelligence is a tool, and predictive analytics is the result. So think of business intelligence as a hammer, and predictive analytics, as well as prescriptive analytics, as the house that you're going to build. So you need BI, you need to be able to to collect the data, to extract it from where it is, to be able to give it some structure, and then put it in a format that's intuitive and easy to understand. And the result of that is predictive analytics or prescriptive analytics, where you're not only being able to make a prediction of things like maintenance or sales or price structures, but also to be able to make what we call predictive analytics. What can we change to actually make things happen, to be rather proactive rather than reactive with the data. All right, let's see what else that we've got over here. Other than defining ERP project goals, what is the best way to ensure your software provides accurate real-time data? Another good question. So there's a couple things here that I think is in the data and also from our experience. One is you have to understand connectivity. And when we say connectivity, we mean not just within the organization, but allowing your customers to easily connect with you. And what that means is improving the experience from the connectivity. So they are recognized, they're remembered, you provided automation, you're getting data from the customer interaction, that, as well as your internal data, as well as your vendor data. So connectivity is important. That's how you get real-time data. But the other part of it is when you go through a process like this, you need to identify very early on what are your analytical goals, not just your ERP project goals. What do you want to, what kind of analytics do you want to get out of it? And especially ones that align with your business strategy and ones that are actionable. So identify those analytics first. Understand how you can get the most connectivity across the entire ecosystem in the supply chain, and then apply that to business goals. And I think that's how you'll be able to ensure that your software, the benefits in terms of real-time data, will be provided. All right, let's take one more question. What is the most beneficial use of AI that you've seen in manufacturing organizations? That's a good question as well. So I want to say that the kind of standard early benefits that people have seen are things like predictive maintenance, being able to not work a machine until it fails, but actually schedule maintenance, know what's going to fail, when it's going to fail. The whole idea of predictive maintenance is to get ahead of the system failures. We've also seen a lot with price forecasting, but I think what we're going to see in the future, the most important thing we're going to see with AI manufacturing is going to have to do with creating autonomous supply chains. One of the big things we've seen over the last 12 months was a huge disruption in supply chain that was unforeseen and unpredicted. And so what we're going to, I think, see now is when you look at supply chains, it's a super network. So you've got local suppliers, you've got global suppliers, you've got long lead time items, you've got overseas transportation, you've got thousands of parts, you may have multiple locations. It gets to be a tremendous amount of data to be able to manage. So AI becomes a tool to take all this, put it together, to be able to understand from the small anomalies in the data, what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, inventory levels, price levels, the best shipping route. So when you start looking at supply chain in its entirety, I think you're going to see that AI is going to be a key component to being able to create autonomous supply chains. And then supply chain is not just external to the organization, but internal in the organization. So when you start building that whole chain, and you look at overall equipment efficiency, that becomes a part of that. When you look at inventory with expiration dates, with vendor selection, with costing and pricing on that entire supply chain, I think that's where we're going to see the biggest benefit from AI in the manufacturing environment, especially in the next year or two. So that's all the time we've got. Those were 3 very good questions. I want to thank you for sending those over. The entire survey is available on our website for download. So if you want to get all of the details behind it, feel free to go on and download the survey. Again, I would suggest you go to our website, look at the study, and enter to win a free hours of consulting. So with that, thank you very much for your time and attention, and have a great day.